Welcome to this week's episode of Basics of Programming. The episode will be on arrays in Java and how to use them. As always, the video will be divided into two sections, essential knowledge and additional information. Feel free to skip ahead to section 2 if you already know how to use arrays in Java. With that out of the way, let's begin. Part 1. Essential knowledge about arrays in Java. First off, what are arrays? Arrays are object types that hold a set of values rather than a single value. They are very comparable to vectors and arrays from math and can be thought of as a container for multiple variables. Note that one-dimensional arrays are actually most similar to a vector in that they hold a set of values in order, while multi-dimensional arrays, which we'll talk about later, are much more similar to an array in math. To talk about arrays, we'll need to define some terms. First and foremost, an element is an individual value stored in the array. You can think of this as a variable in the array, and in the picture below, each number is an element. An index is the position at which an element is stored in the array, and each index corresponds to one element. In the image below, you can see how each element is at a position that we can access by passing the correct index. Finally, the array type is the variable type of the elements kept in the array. The example below has array type double, as it stores double values. In Java, arrays are one-dimensional by default and have a specific unchanging length set at initialization. When an array is declared, just enough memory is set aside to hold the number of variables equal to its length. As such, the array cannot be extended, and to add elements to a full array, you have to make a new array of a larger size. The array indices go from 0 to 1 less than the length. Note that the nth element of the array is always at index n-1. For example, the first element is at index 0 and the last element is at index length -1. Now let's talk about multidimensional arrays. Like I hinted to previously, arrays in Java are one-dimensional by default, but you can make arrays with any number of dimensions, assuming you do not run out of memory. Arrays with more than one dimension are known as multidimensional arrays. 2D arrays are very common, 3D arrays are used occasionally, and higher dimension arrays are much more rare. Multidimensional arrays are essentially arrays containing other arrays as the array type. For example, a 2D array contains n 1D arrays, where n is the length of the 2D array. Each element in the outer array is another array known as an inner array. And to access any element in the inner array, you have to specify the index in the outer array, as well as the index in the inner array. Like I said previously, multidimensional arrays are most similar to an array in math, or specifically 2D arrays are most similar to arrays in math, and that you have a row and a column that each element is stored in. Also, though each array has a fixed length, the length of each inner array does not need to match the other inner arrays. In addition, you can create a new array for each inner array, rather than defining its size at declaration. The only value you must define at declaration is the length of the outer array. Multidimensional arrays are very useful when you need multiple values for each element. For example, if you're recording the heights and jersey numbers of a team of basketball players, you can use the outer array to store the players, and the inner array to store the height and jersey number of each individual player. To end part 1, let's look at a couple examples of arrays. The first example uses a one-dimensional array named myArray, with length 4 and array type int. An array is declared by writing the variable type and later a pair of square brackets. You can declare an array with values already in it by using curly brackets and separating the elements with commas. The square brackets can either go before or after the variable name, and an array without preset values would be set using int square brackets myArray is equal to new int open square brackets length close square brackets. As you can see below, arrays are very useful when used alongside loops, as they let you do an action with each element. The next example shows the use of a 2D array. As you can see, multidimensional arrays use multiple square brackets in initialization, with each pair representing one dimension. The first set of square brackets refer to the outer array, and the second pair refers to the inner arrays. As you can see, you can access elements by writing the name of the array and putting the index of the element between square brackets. Also note that for most applications, such as the pixels in an image, the outer array refers to row, and the inner array refers to column. Now let's move on to part 2, additional information. In this episode, we'll focus on another similar object used to store multiple values in Java, the ArrayList. An ArrayList is an object that, similar to arrays, acts to hold multiple values under one object. However, it has some very important differences from an array. While an array is a built-in structure, an ArrayList is a list object, which is itself a collection object. This has many consequences, most importantly that ArrayLists have a varying length and different syntax. As a brief aside, the ArrayList class actually uses an array to store information. It just creates a new array of a larger size for you and has many methods normal arrays do not have. A varying length is extremely important for a couple reasons. First, it allows you to declare an array list before you know the number of elements you must store. Second, you can add an indefinite number of elements to a pre-existing array list at any time with no extra effort. As an example of how useful this is, you can create an array list to hold some elements, such as our previous basketball players, and simply add to that array list when new players join the team, rather than be forced to create an entirely new array and copy over all the players from the original array. Importantly, while arrays can use primitives or objects as their types, array lists only take objects as their types. They can even hold arrays or other array lists, similar to multidimensional arrays, though I will not be covering that today. In addition to these differences, array lists use built-in class methods rather than special syntax, which is what arrays use. As an example, setting an element to a value with an array list involves using the set method, whereas in arrays you use brackets to get the element at that index and make it equal to the desired value. Finally, let's take a look at ArrayList syntax. ArrayList has many built-in methods, but of them, these methods are the most important. Let's look at how each one is used in the code snippet below. Though not a method, notice how ArrayLists are declared. You must use less than and more than signs with your ArrayList type between them to initialize an ArrayList, but the new ArrayList does not need that type to be specified. ArrayLists have two add methods. Using just an element will add that element to the end of the ArrayList, while using an index and an element will add the element at that index and shift every element with the higher index to the right. The set method replaces the element at the index with a new element, and is similar to changing an array value. Note that you cannot set an element at an index above the array list size, as you can only add an element to change the size. Get returns the element at that index, and remove gets rid of the element at that index and shifts every element with a higher index to the left. Clear removes all elements from the array list, setting the size back to 0. Finally, size returns the length of the array list, which specifically is the number of elements in the list. And with that, today's episode comes to an end. Feel free to leave comments below. I would love to see what you thought about the episode or any feedback on the format. And if you have any topics you would like to learn, please let me know below. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video helped you better understand arrays in Java.